Yo, YouTube, what is good? It's Aegis. In this video, we have some crazy changes coming to the game on this upcoming Tuesday. I just wanted to kind of break down my thoughts and opinions on the mage related ones and maybe some mage related ones that will help to know. You know, so if there's some class that, maybe is really strong in a mage that got buffed, we'll go over that one as well. So if we want to hop over to the changes here, we'll see we are regularly making class balance adjustments based on gameplay data and feedback from players on class performance with scheduled weekly maintenance in each region. So that'll be November 26th for this region. We'll make the following changes to classes that are over and underperforming in various cases. So this top section here will be the PvE related changes. However, everything will be applying to PvP unless stated otherwise. So in this case, like this one, for example, Feral, Rip, Rake, and Rampant Ferocity damage increased by 10%. But, however, that's not applying to PvP. So you can apply that to all further changes. The first things we'll look at here is the Mage. Developer notes, Frostfire is still underperforming for both Frost and Fire. This is probably in a PvE context. So we're targeting buffs to Frostfire's various procs and providing a more substantial throughput buff via Fire Mastery's haste value. So developers notes here for Fire Mage. Fire's been underperforming in single target, could use some help. Rather than distributing this bonus through a myriad of spells, we're opting to put most of our budget into Pyroblast to ensure the spell is keeping pace with the rest of Fire's kits. So that's a huge W for us. Pyroblast is arguably the most fun spell to press on Fire, and the reason that we all kind of like playing Fire Mage is just to sling big Pyroblasts. So we can see some changes here that are actually pretty huge. Frostfire, Fire Mastery now grants 2% haste instead of 1. So this one's actually pretty large. So you'll notice this one here on the Frostfire side of things, that the Frostfire Mastery, the Fire section gives you haste every single time that you're using a Fire spell. So you use Fire Blast and you build up a couple stacks of Fire Mastery. That's going to now increase your haste by 12% instead of 6, because it's going to be, for every 1% is now 2%. So a 12% haste buff instead of a 6%, that is a massive buff to haste. Isothermic Core Comet Storm effectiveness increased to 200%, was 150. So what Isothermic Core is the talent that calls down a Comet Storm whenever you meteor. So right now it's coming down at 150% effectiveness, so it's doing like 50% more damage than normal. Now it's going to do double its normal damage. So this is really huge for Fire's burst. This is going to add a lot of burst to Fire Mage. So Comet Storm is kind of like a huge cooldown now. And on top of that, if we skip down just a little bit, you'll see that excess frost cooldown reduction increased to 10%. So what that means is that anytime that you get to max frost mastery, your next Phoenix Flames will cast the Ice Nova at 125% effectiveness, and then whenever you consume that, the cooldown of the meteor is reduced. So you'll get frost mastery throughout a couple different, just basically anytime. It just kind of ramps up passively as you do your damage rotation, and then once you have that stack and you meteor, whenever you press Phoenix, it'll go down by 5 seconds. Now it's going to go down by 10 seconds. So not only is your Comet Storm doing more damage, you're going to get Comet Storm back passively a lot quicker as well. So this is going to help Fire Mage out quite a bit, I would say. And then we have Ashen Feather Phoenix damage increased to 50%, was 25. This basically just meant that whenever you Phoenix Flamed and you hit one target, it would do 25% increased damage and apply Ignite at 150% effectiveness. So this basically just makes Phoenix Flames like not a terrible spell in a single target context. So, into stuff with no pets, this talent is going to be very, very good. And of course, the big one here, man, Pyroblast damage increased by 8%. That's just massive. It's your main damaging spell, and that's the spell you're pressing like 80% of the game essentially. So Pyroblast damage increased by 8%. That is just absolutely phenomenal for us. Meteor damage, direct damage increased by 25%. obviously in conjunction with isothermic core, that's going to be insane burst on Fire Mage. So that I'm really looking forward to how Fire is going to feel with the pyro buffs, the haste buffs, and the Comet Storm Meteor buffs. I think Fire is going to feel pretty nice to play. There is some passive damage increase here too, like Frostfire Burst and Frostfire Infusion. These are lesser these are like lesser damaging spells, like Frostfire Infusion. Just throughout doing damage, you'll get like little procs of it. It's just a little like you can see here, it procs for 50k, right? So it just, and then the Frostfire Burst, like these spells just kind of like they're little, you know, spells that in the grand scheme of things aren't doing too much damage. Like you can see, once I get further into my rotation, they kind of fall off, right? But these getting a little bit of a buff is like just more passive damage, so more damage in general, which is something that you never want to complain too much about. So these are all really good. I'm excited to see how Fire feels. And then we have a couple more for Fire that I'll cover real quick before we get into the other stuff. Real quick, just as I'm scrolling by the Frost stuff, you'll notice that none of these are applying in PvP combat, so these are all not really worth going over at all. So we'll scroll down now to the PvP side of things, and we'll see more stuff here for Fire. However, this is regarding Sun Fury. So developers notes, we're shifting Arcane's damage profile a bit away from burst damage into their consistent damage, and increasing the effectiveness of Sun Fury to increase hero talent diversity. So disregarding the first part about Arcane, we'll stay on Fire for now. They're increasing the effectiveness of Sun Fury to increase hero talent diversity. Now, will this be enough to basically play Sun Fury over Frostfire is probably the big question here. And with how many buffs to like Frostfire Infusion, Frostfire Mastery, excess Frost buff, Isothermic Core buff, it's like, will it really be enough to warrant playing it over Frostfire? I'm not sold on it personally yet. I think we'll still be Frostfire. So essentially what these buffs mean, Spellfire Spheres grants 2% increased spell damage. So a Spellfire Sphere is generated every 6 times that you hot streak. So if I can just generate 6 hot streaks real quick, I'll just go ahead and pop Combustion, so I can build them a little quicker. You'll see that I get a sphere here. And once you get that sphere, it consumes it into your Phoenix. So the Phoenix damage is getting buffed down here. All Arcane Phoenix damage increased by 20% besides GPI and Arcane Surge. So like whenever your Phoenix procs Meteorites, Barrages, I think it can do like Flame Strikes and some other funky spells. Essentially those ones will be empowered. But back to the spheres here. Essentially whenever you build up a Spellfire Sphere, your spell damage will be increased by 1%. Now it'll be 2%. And they're also buffing Lingering Embers, since once you pop your Combustion, you actually lose all of these spheres because they go into your Phoenix. So your Phoenix does damage over the course of your Combustion, and it consumes these spheres. So you lose the 2% increased spell power damage, which would actually be 12% if you're at max Spellfire Spheres. And then you still get to keep that spell power due to Lingering Embers, because, you know, this one here, over the course of your over its duration, your Arcane Phoenix will consume each of your Spellfire Spheres to cast an exceptional spell. Upon consuming it, the Arcane Phoenix will grant you a Lingering Ember, which is essentially just, instead of a permanent buff, like you can see this sphere, these 3 spheres I have, it's just a permanent 3% increase. Would be a 6% increase on the patch day. And then whenever you pop Combustion, your Phoenix will just consume all of those. So right now we have 3 spheres still. So I'll go ahead and pop Combustion, and we'll see this number go down a little bit. That's it, consuming, the Phoenix consuming. And then you can see you get left with Lingering Embers. So essentially if you have max spheres before you go into Combustion, you will have 12% more damage on your Combustion. And your Phoenix, which is currently doing pretty much the top damage if you have good Combustions, is going to also receive 20% buff on all the spells that it casts besides the big ones. So like this Flame Strike would do 20% more, this Barrage would do 20% more, this Meteorite would do 20% more. So they are nice buffs, to be honest. Will it put Fire Mage, Sun Fury above Frostfire? In my opinion, no. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but we have all of these buffs up here, which I think outweigh a lot of the Sun Fury ones. Like this one is crazy, this one is insane. These two are pretty, like, you know, whatever, but it's still a damage increase. This one is insane. This one is like kind of mediocre, but still all right. This one is absolutely nuclear, and then this one is actually pretty large as well. So some giant buffs that you won't really get to take advantage of too much if you play Sun Fury. But on the flip side of things, Sun Fury also grants you that hyperthermia, or hypothermia, I suppose, whenever your combustion is over. So whenever your combust ends and your Phoenix goes away, you get access to hyperthermia, which is basically just free pyroblasts. Now, with the pyro buff, will those extra pyroblasts put Sun Fury over the edge? Again, I'm not really positive, but my first glance is no. Like I really do think Frostfire will probably still be better, but I can't wait to, you know, test it out and maybe even be proven wrong. For now, the first thing I'll be testing is Frostfire on release, and we'll go into that. Now I wanted to go over Arcane Mage a little bit. So let me swap over to Arcane here. We can discuss a little bit about what's going on. So developers notes, we're shifting Arcane's damage profile a bit away from burst damage and into the consistent damage, and increasing the effectiveness of Sun Fury to increase hero talent diversity. So just to cover all the Sun Fury stuff real quick on Arcane, it's essentially the same thing as Fire. The Spellfire Spheres is increased, the Lingering Embers is increased, and the Phoenix damage is increased. Will this be enough to put it above Spell Slinger? Again, off the top of my head, I want to say no, but I could be wrong. But we'll have to see. I'm excited to see if that's the case. So Arcane, first change here, Arcanosphere damage increased by 40%. I don't know, man. Whenever I think of Arcanosphere, I don't really think of a damaging button. So a fully charged Arcanosphere is not something that is very practical in an arena environment, and I don't think that change is going to drastically affect Arcane Mage, especially considering there's a kind of a weird bug with Shimmer, which is the primary source of mobility that you have as an Arcane Mage, and it's that you can't shimmer while you're casting it, because Arcanosphere, if you want to get this thing fully channeled in PvP, you're gonna have to definitely be able to move with it. And right now in PvP, or right now with Shimmer, if you channel it and you try to shimmer somewhere, it just sends the sphere off. Like it just cancels the cast early and sends it. So I don't think it's gonna be super practical. You're gonna be kind of forced into playing Ice Flows, which is just kind of worse right now to play. And that's why this change to me is kind of meaningless, but maybe somehow that ends up doing a lot of damage. I could see in a battleground context that change being really insane, but for arenas, not too excited on that one. I would have liked to see that buff into some other kind of area of Arcane. And then here's where we get into some of the burst nerfs. So Arcane Surge now increases damage by 20. It was 25. So this means that whenever you surge, that modifier that you get is going to go down from 25% to 20%. So your surge modifier is less strong. However, they are buffing the baseline damage of missiles and blast by 10% and by 15% for barrage. So these are the kind of changes that I personally like to see on an Arcane Mage. I think the most fun iteration of Arcane Mage is one where Arcane Blast does a lot of damage without cooldowns. So if you have 4 arcane charges and you are sitting there pressing Arcane Blast, you are doing a lot of damage. Because right now, that's not the case at all. These are hitting for laughably low numbers, and Arcane is heavily reliant on having its cooldowns to actually do any damage at all. And to me, Arcane Mage has always been like whenever you're at 4 arcane charges and you cast an arcane blast, that's a lot of damage. And currently that's not the case. Is a 10% buff really gonna fix that? In my opinion, probably not, but it's a step in the right direction, at least for me. I'm not too hype on most of these changes, but I do think they are really good and a step in the right direction for sure. So yeah, missiles damage increase, blast damage increase, and barrage damage increase. These are obviously very nice. And then of course we had the surge modifier reduced, which again, I personally like. I don't like arcane when I'm tied to arcane, surge, and magi both to do any damage at all. And then we have a bombardment, now increases arcane barrage's damage by 20%, was 40. So bombardment is this talent here. Arcane barrage deals in PvP, I believe that's I guess 40% in PvP. Now it's 20. So it does less of an execute now. So your execute is a little bit weaker as well. I think a friend of mine did the math on it, said it was like a 5% damage nerf or something like that. I'm not entirely sure how the math comes out, but so basically you can think about it like surge and execute barrage got a 5% nerf, but in exchange you got a lot more consistent damage on your abilities, which is pretty nice. So we'll have to see how Arcane is feeling. Again, maybe Sun Fury is even better. We'll have to just test it out when it comes, you know, when it releases on Tuesday. Let me know in the comment section what you guys are going to be testing first, or what changes you're the most excited for. Now, like I promised at the start, we'll get into a little bit of the extra stuff about the changes here. So Blood Decay nerf, that was poggers. I believe this is pretty big on Holy buff. We have some Havoc Demon Hunter buffs. We have, so these ones are the scariest for sure. These are pretty large marksmanship buffs. So Rapid Fire 15, Aim Shot 15, and Dark Ranger Black Arrow increased by 12% in PvP. So I think that's like their kill shot. So yeah, these buffs are definitely really scary if you're a mage player, because marksmanship hunters traditionally kind of just like do a lot of damage to mages. But anyways, let's continue going down. So we have some Holy Priest buffs, which are pretty awesome because as a mage you're commonly playing with a Holy Priest, which is pretty dope. So these are some nice healing buffs, and we have some more stuff for Holy Priest up here as well. Sanctify and Serenity increased. There was some sub-rogue stuff here, but it's nothing really too crazy. The LA Shaman buffs, I'm not even really sure how to perceive those. And then we had some other stuff a little bit down here, I believe. Oh yeah, so this annoying Windwalker passive, this isn't something that you necessarily had to deal with as a mage, but pretty much there was a stacking buff on Monk that would eventually get to a point where your next ability on them would always dodge. This was really annoying to play into as any melee class, because you would just tab target over to this Monk, right, and try to kidney shot him, and it would just immune, because the first thing you'd have to like use a global on them first to get the Dance of the Wind stacks off. Now it's not going to be a guarantee dodge, so that's kind of nice. This talent was very clunky and annoying to play around. This one I'm not sure how insane this is, because I believe they made Eye for an Eye in this 20th anniversary patch, or maybe the patch before it. They made Eye for an Eye affect magic damage, so this could potentially be kind of annoying to play into. We'll see. And I believe that's all. I think this is like a Shadow Bolt buff, but either way, I predict that this will be a very decent time for us. The only thing that's like kind of putting us potentially in a bad spot, at least in solo shuffle, will be these marksmanship buffs. But overall, the state of Mage currently I'm very happy with. I think Frost Mage is extremely fun. It's not getting nerfed, it's not getting changed in any way, and some other stuff is getting buffed, like the other specs. I always enjoy when more than one mage spec is viable at any given time. But I hear a lot of people, just to address, I hear a lot of people saying that they think Mage is in a bad place right now. I would have to disagree. I think that I understand the perspective of the people that are saying that. However, I think it's important to categorize Mage into different brackets. So for example, I think when most people say mages suck, they're referring to solo shuffle, because Mage and solo shuffle, or sorry, solo shuffle is sort of like the main game mode for World of Warcraft right now, and it's kind of what primarily people are playing. And it is true that in solo shuffle, it is a harder environment to succeed in as a mage, because you could potentially be thrown into lobbies that either have class stacking, so like 2 hunters, 2 warlocks, 2 shamans, something like that, something that's difficult to play into. But at the same time, it's like, you know, every sort of class has a good lobby and a bad lobby. And I think instead of saying, I think it's unfair to say, you know, oh, Mage is dog shit right now. I think it's probably more proper to say like Mage is a little bit more RNG in solo shuffle, because Mage as a class, like namely Frost Mage right now, which is kind of like the main spec that everyone's playing, Frost is actually an amazing spec right now. Frost has a really, really good toolkit to it with Snowdrift, Ice Wall, burst windows with Comet Storm every, you know, 30 seconds, 25 seconds, I think, actually. And then your Icy Veins turns you into a monster. Like the damage in Icy Veins is absurdly high. I think a lot of people are kind of not feeling the Frostbolt build too much, which could cause some frustration. I myself was there quite a bit ago. It took me a long time to adapt to the Frostbolt build, but I feel like I finally hit that point where I'm actually like super duper comfortable on it and super confident on it. Because Frostbolt build for me wasn't one that I was super invested in. It's one that I've never played even throughout the variations of Frost Mage. Like for example, in Dragonflight Season 2, I believe Frostbolt build existed, but I was like, nah, I'm just gonna go play Arcane. I got rank 1 with Arcane instead. So it's like, anytime Mage was kind of a Frostbolt class, I sort of just stayed away from it. But this time around, with no other Mage spec being as viable as Frostbolt build, I was sort of forced to practice it and forced to kind of take accountability a little bit and be like, okay, wow, Frostbolt build, like, I see a lot of other mages succeeding in solo shuffle. Like there are mages that are 2650 and I'm sitting over here like 2400, like I'm struggling. And I was like, okay, so it's not the class, like people are doing well with the class in solo shuffle, it's me. Like I need to actually sit down and take accountability and learn about what I'm doing wrong. And I think through doing that, it's definitely helped me improve on the Frostbolt build a lot, to the point where I've actually, you know, I'm almost 2600 now, so hopefully going for that #1 spot soon. It's been eye-opening. Just kind of wanted to share that experience to, you know, maybe help you guys if you're also struggling, because I came to that realization that it's not my class, it's not the spec. Mage is really freaking good right now, and it just takes some practice and getting used to. And I think that's going to be the case. Basically, this whole thing is leading up to, I think that's going to be the case for this upcoming meta maybe as well, because BM hunters didn't get nerfed, and marksmanship hunters are getting buffed. So that might create a dangerous territory, but at the same time, I think our class is going to be very strong. So I think we're going to be able to still succeed pretty well. But will you have to practice? Will you have to work for it? Most likely. So that's all I have. I'm signing off here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about all these changes. I'm out. Peace.